Yondu had set Star-Lord's bounty a little low this time, but that was understandable. This time, Star-Lord hadn't gotten his hands on the Power Stone, so Yondu's business hadn't suffered. Still, Star-Lord had managed to get on Yondu's nerves. As a foster father, Yondu decided he had to drag that stubborn, disobedient kid back and give him a good thrashing. So, he put up this rather awkward bounty. If someone managed to catch him, great. If not, well, it didn't really matter. Only 8,000 for the bounty? Well, Groot, what do you think? Should we just grab him while we're at it? It's not a bad haul, all things considered. The raccoon spoke, glancing at his companion. Before the two of them could settle on a plan, the raccoon turned his screen toward the couple sitting under the sunshade, laughing and sipping their drinks. Bounty details. Target: Ignace Mora. Requirement: capture alive. If that's too difficult, killing is acceptable. Employers: Yondu Yidanta, Ronin. Reward: 100,000. Note: good luck. Target: is death. Requirement: capture alive. If that's too difficult, killing is acceptable. Employers: Yondu Yidanta, Ronin. Reward: 100,000. Note: treat yourself to something nice. After reading, the raccoon was first overjoyed, but then his expression shifted, a strange feeling creeping over him. These two bounties were far too unusual. The employers hadn't just lowered the bar on capture requirements. The payout was enormous. And both employers were infamous, notoriously dangerous figures. They even left personal notes for the hunters. One read, "Good luck." The other, "Treat yourself to something nice." It was as if they were advising overconfident hunters to have a good meal before heading out, wishing them luck, and reminding them if they lost, at least they wouldn't die with too many regrets. One of those chilling, half-joking warnings. The raccoon's instincts screamed at him. There was no way he could catch those two, not with his current abilities. But the promise of 200,000 was almost irresistible. That kind of payday could set him up for life, maybe even early retirement. Yet the employer's notes made their meaning clear. You're not strong enough. Go after them, and you'll die. Are you kidding me? Are you just messing with people's heads now? The raccoon burst out, cursing at the bounty posters. Those sky-high rewards glittered in his eyes like pure gold. But beneath the temptation lay the dangers, the strength of the targets, the warnings about capture difficulty. It all screamed that this job was a death sentence. He was truly torn. He wanted the money, but he was scared stiff. Screw it. I'll go after that little rookie first and see how that goes. With that, the raccoon's gaze locked back onto Star-Lord. He wanted to go after Ignace and his death, but fear held him back. He'd need a lot more preparation before taking that risk. After all, money's for enjoying life, not for dying over. Once you're dead, the cash doesn't matter anymore. Groot, let's go make a quick buck. After that, we'll take our time getting ready for the big score. Sound good? Ha ha ha. The raccoon grinned at his companion as he spoke. But when he turned around, he was utterly speechless. Groot, could you please stop embarrassing us already? Why are you drinking from the fountain again? Groot drank water quietly as he watched his companion, and for a moment, an odd tension filled the air between them. After a bit of thought, Groot decided to give his friend some dignity. He plunged his head into the pond, taking a hearty gulp, then lifted his head and nodded at the raccoon man, as if to say, "See, I'm done drinking now." The raccoon man was left speechless. Not long after, Star-Lord made his way to the trading spot. With an apologetic tone, he told the buyer that someone else had claimed that little orb, the opponent, was simply too powerful for him to handle. He had no choice but to admit defeat and announce the mission's failure. The buyer shook his head with resignation. There was nothing to be done. After all, he'd heard the rumors. A human from the distant planet, Terra, along with his companion, had managed to take down an entire squadron of Ronin's ships and even killed a group of Yondu's men. Meanwhile, just outside, a raccoon lugged a rocket launcher on his back and aimed a gun inside, while a familiar, somewhat clueless companion followed behind. They were ready to capture Star-Lord, hoping to earn a bit of cash, enough, perhaps, to kickstart their plan to catch Ignace. At that very moment, Ignace sat with a tablet in hand, hacking into Xander's network and infiltrating the raccoon's equipment. He chatted idly with his death while eavesdropping on the raccoon's furious mutterings about Star-Lord's delay, his fingers clattering over the controls. Did the raccoon think he had a bead on Ignace? He couldn't have been more wrong. The smart cube had already detected every move he made. Ignace sat leisurely under a sunshade, conversing with his death as he watched the tablet screen, keeping an eye on the street surveillance, witnessing the raccoon's attempted kidnapping of Star-Lord unfold. But truth be told, this creature wasn't a raccoon at all. He called himself Rocket, a product of illegal genetic and neuromechanical experimentation, gifted with skeletal manipulation, enhanced metacarpal and phalangeal strength, and a genetically augmented cerebral cortex. He was no ordinary raccoon. Still, Ignace couldn't resist calling him Little Raccoon. He figured it was a courtesy not to tack on instant noodles to the nickname. Meanwhile, on the second floor across the street, Gamora sat quietly with a drink, observing Ignace. According to Ronin's intelligence, Ignace was a formidable close combat fighter, skilled in long-range attacks, and possessed some arcane black technology that could be used on both ships and individuals. So for Gamora, confronting Ignace was nothing like dealing with a petty thief like Star-Lord. She couldn't afford to be simple or brash. She was planning a better strategy to steal the orb. After all, she wasn't confident she could kill him. But Ignace had already noticed Gamora. Traveling the cosmos, it was unthinkable that he'd journey only with his death. He also had the Blood God and the Chief at his side, along with several cursed spirits. Some of the spirits stayed on the ship, while others remained close. Precautions to guard against theft, sabotage, or unwanted surveillance. There's hardly any better counter-surveillance measure than being surrounded by a group of cursed spirits invisible to ordinary people. As for Gamora, Ignace didn't actually harbor much hostility toward her. In fact, he was even scheming about how to bait Gamora, trick her into switching sides, and persuade her to work for him. After all, an assassin as skilled as Gamora is a rare find. What's more, she's a living weapon, surgically enhanced and relentlessly trained. If he could bring her back to Earth and guide her onto the right path, she could at least count as a lesser superhero. Gamora actually holds a grudge against Thanos, and has been planning to betray him ever since she left Ronan's warship. So Ignace saw a real chance to talk her into abandoning the darkness for the light. Watching the surveillance feed, Ignace couldn't help but chuckle as Rocket, accompanied by the dull-witted Groot, tossed a sack over Star-Lord and nabbed him right after the buyer had thrown him out. Rocket was truly brazen, bold enough to stir up trouble right under Nova Corps' watchful eyes, on their own turf. Ignace had to admit, he was impressed. Rising to his feet, he left with this death, intending to find a hotel for some rest. Sure, you could sleep on a spaceship, but after spending so long confined in one, fatigue inevitably creeps in. Anyone would prefer a comfortable bed in a cozy hotel for a good night's sleep. When he returned to Xandar, he'd already made some inquiries at the starport. The Xandarians replied that, except for one notorious thief, they had never seen anyone from Terra arrive in their ships all these years. Captain Marvel doesn't count. Who knows where she is, and besides, her abilities came from an accident. Ignace relies on technology. What astonished the Xandarians was the level of Earth's technology, and it was the science, not the superpowers, that earned their admiration. Terra is just another name for Earth, so blue, so rare in the vastness of space, and protected by Asgard, making it untouchable. It's like a fragile, beautiful blue pearl. So while the Nine Realms call it Midgard, to everyone else in the galaxy, it's Terra, the blue planet. The Xandarians were stunned that Earth had managed to develop such advanced spaceships. They asked just to be sure and learned that, yes, it was entirely human-made. They realized it wouldn't be long before Earth entered the ranks of interstellar civilizations. The head of Xandar Starport was so impressed that he personally received Ignace, gifted him some galactic currency, and promised that as long as Earth established diplomatic relations with their empire, both Xandar and the Nova Corps would welcome friendly exchanges with humanity. Moreover, the Nova Empire will provide Earth with economic assistance and favorable currency exchange policies, all to help it integrate with the interstellar community. The Nova Corps is even willing to engage in certain technological exchanges with Earth. So when Ignace arrived on Xandar, he didn't find himself at a loss due to alien currency. Far from it. The Xandarians were generous hosts, offering him some money to get by. They even pledged mutual aid between different interstellar civilizations. In truth, the reason the Xandarians treated him so well could be traced back to one thing. They believed Earth was on the rise, and they wanted to make an investment in its future. At the root of all this newfound respect was Earth's growing strength. Only now did those on Xandar begin to pay serious attention. Of course, if they had known that Earth had only just started to build its solar system transport and communication networks, and that there were still people resisting the threat of the Mora Corporation, still plotting to seize its technology and continuing their infighting, the Xandarians wouldn't have taken Earth so seriously. On the contrary, they might have looked down on them. One god leading a band of misfits, this little planet still had a long road ahead on its path to greatness. After finding a hotel, Nashi in his death had a meal and took a bath, then went about the most important business of the day. Finally, they sank into the incredibly soft bed, drifting off to sleep and rest. Meanwhile, Rocket Raccoon and Groot tried to kidnap Star-Lord, but Star-Lord wasn't one to be taken down easily. Groot, ever the simpleton, stuffed Star-Lord straight into a sack. Star-Lord slashed it open with his knife, and in one swift move, hacked off Groot's arm. In the next moment, Rocket hoisted up his massive stun gun and fired a powerful electric charge. Electricity arced around Star-Lord's body as he collapsed to the ground, twitching uncontrollably. Rocket rushed in, ready to avenge Groot with a beating, but before he could land a punch, Star-Lord shook off the effects, kicked out with both feet, and sent Rocket flying. Back and forth they went, exchanging blows in a wild, chaotic brawl. The Xandarians stood off to the side, watching the spectacle unfold. They marveled at the gadgets flashing between the fighters, but wisely chose not to get involved. Suddenly, a fleet of ships descended. Beams of light shot out, ensnaring the trio and lifting them helplessly into the air. There was no resisting this kind of force. Specimen 89P13, drop your weapon. And you, the thief who calls himself Star Prince, put down your weapon too. In the name of the Nova Corps, I declare you under arrest. You are charged with endangering public safety. A member of the Nova Corps made the announcement from aboard the spaceship. Hey, it's Star-Lord, not Star Prince. Come on, that's my name, the infamous outlaw. Give me some credit here. Star-Lord hurriedly called out. Honestly, Was this really the time to be correcting nicknames? Rocket Raccoon shook his head in disbelief. What kind of people was he stuck with? The next morning, on Xander, inside a modest inn, Ignace rose early. As part of their morning routine, he and Isdeth engaged in a spirited debate over who was truly the master. After washing up and finishing breakfast, he settled by the window, basking in Xander's perpetual spring sunlight, chatting idly with Isdeth, occasionally rubbing his hands for warmth and comfort. Meanwhile, Star-Lord, Rocket Raccoon, and Groot were only just waking up in their space prison. The group lay sprawled on the cold floor, no beds in sight. One rested on another's chest, another's head propped against a companion's leg. It had been a miserable night. The inmates had been rowdy all day, but by nightfall, no one had the energy left for any of the prison's infamous nighttime antics. Everyone lay down and slept, but the air was thick with a mixed, peculiar sense of countless alien species. The stench inside the cell truly defied description. The place where Rocket Raccoon, Star-Lord, and Groot were imprisoned was the KYLN, the Nova Empire's highest security prison. Of course, the authorities only cared about keeping the prisoners from escaping. Internecine fighting and casualties were none of their concern. While the trio endured their daily barrage of verbal greetings from fellow inmates, Gamora was stationed in a high-rise on Xander, keeping a close eye on the inn across the street. Damn it, what's their deal? It's almost noon. Why haven't they left yet? Gamora's plan was simple. Watch Ignace and Isdeth for a while, wait for a moment when they were apart, then use her charm to approach Ignace, catch him off guard, and steal the orb. The plan was flawless, ingenious, even only someone with her cunning could come up with something so audacious. Gamora was convinced she could pull it off, snatch the orb, sell it to a third-party buyer, and keep it out of Thanos' clutches. But this surveillance had already lasted several days. Gamora found herself subjected, from afar, to an endless display of Ignace and Isdeth's public affection right through the window. The cold-blooded assassin Gamora, forced to watch this ongoing romance, was nearly sickened by the sight. These two were almost never apart, no matter the hour. At most, one would head to the bathroom, while the other lingered over breakfast. She had even witnessed the absurd scene of one following the other straight to the restroom. By day, they flaunted their affection. By night, they'd have the inn's AI close the curtains for privacy and soundproof the room, indulging in certain activities whose details needed no explanation. Gamora couldn't see or hear what went on, but she could guess well enough. Day after day, building after building, she'd been forced to endure this spectacle. Honestly, if she were strong enough to take them both, she would have rushed in and ended them herself. It wasn't until Roninside was about to start urging her, Nebula was even thinking of coming over to replace her, that she finally found an opportunity. It had been far too difficult. Today, Ignatius went out shopping, and surprisingly, for once, he didn't bring Isdeth along. Gamora was moved to tears. After nearly a whole week of watching the two flaunt their affection, she finally had a chance to approach Ignatius alone. In a hurry, Gamora changed into an outfit that was at least somewhat attractive and alluring, rushed to the elevator at top speed, and quickly headed downstairs. Dashing out of the building, she trailed after Ignatius, hoping to find an opportunity to get close to him. After observing for so many days, she discovered that Ignatius was deeply and genuinely in love with Isdeth, a true champion of pure love. Even when surrounded by all kinds of exotic beauties from other planets, he never spared them a second glance. So, Gamora realized that simply walking up to Ignatius and awkwardly starting a conversation wouldn't work. He would never lower his guard just because she happened to be attractive. Instead, she thought she should try something a little more romantic, find a chance to bump into him by accident, get to know him little by little, spend a few days understanding him, and then make her move. This way, Ignatius would surely let his guard down, giving her the chance to seize what she wanted. On Xander, inside a large supermarket, Ignatius was browsing alien beverages. While not far off, by the cookie shelves, Gamora pretended to be picking out cookies. She casually glanced back, watching Ignatius select his drinks, and felt a surge of joy in her heart. This Terran newcomer had no clue about the pros and cons of the Galaxy Beverage Company's products. She finally had a reasonable excuse to approach him. This brand isn't very good. It's actually made for a species called the Dant, who have beast-like traits. The taste is really intense, definitely not for everyone. Gamora hurried over and spoke up. What about this one? Ignatius had already noticed Gamora, but while she thought she was fishing for a reaction, what she didn't know was that Ignatius was fishing too. One of them wanted the Power Stone in the other's hand, the other hoped to recruit her to his side and get her to work for him. This one tastes a bit better, but I'm not sure what Terrans like. You all call yourselves the Blue Stars, right? There's another brand with a milder flavor, not as strong. I suggest you try this one. Gamora pointed out one drink after another, patiently explaining them to Ignatius. As a professional assassin, sometimes her missions required patient investigation and surveillance over long stretches of boredom, so she tried just about every unknown beverage out of sheer curiosity. Thank you for your help. By the way, what's your name? I'm Ignatius Mora, a human from Earth, or as you all call it, a Blue Star. Ignace smiled as he spoke, pretending not to know her, and continued fishing. My name is Kara. It's nice to meet you. Here's my communication code. Once you connect to the Galactic Network, you'll be able to reach me. Gamora quickly put on the act of being an ordinary alien party girl named Kara, who loved drinks, flashing a friendly smile as she spoke. Nashi nodded. He had already applied for an alien contact account himself, so he added Gamora right away. After all, only by getting acquainted could he have the chance to persuade Gamora to be his, well, let's just say his friend. Ignace also understood why Gamora hadn't chosen to use force immediately. Given Ronin's immense power, it was only natural that she might have learned of his own abilities. If Gamora had just recklessly tried to snatch the Power Stone, that would have made the least sense. Ignace and Gamora chatted for a while. Gamora found herself momentarily stunned. Is this really a peace-loving Terran who avoids trouble? She truly couldn't connect the person who had wiped out so many of Ronin's subordinates with someone who claimed to love peace and avoid conflict. The two bid each other farewell, and Ignace took his leave. Only after Ignace had departed the time anomaly did Gamora finally answer Nebula's call. What are you even doing? Hurry up and snatch that ore back. Intelligence says it's on Ignace right now. If you don't act soon, I'll do it myself. Nebula exclaimed, her voice brimming with irritation. Idiot, Ignace is so powerful. I have to use my wits if I want to get that ore from him. Gamora shot back quickly. Nebula was speechless, but she had to admit Gamora was right. Even if she went in Gamora's place, she'd probably have to resort to some strange scheme to wrest the target from Ignace. After all, a fight you can't win is a fight you can't win. Meanwhile, Ignace had returned to the inn. If you were honest, he just played Ronin, Gamora, and Nebula for fools. The story about the Power Stone being in his possession was a bluff. In truth, Isdeth was the one who had it. Several days later, Gamora arranged to meet with Ignace, hoping to have a conversation with him. And then, naturally, her plan was to build some goodwill between them, and when Ignace let his guard down, make her move. Gamora's plan was solid, and she didn't want to drag things out. She thought that a chance encounter, followed by a few days of chatting on an alien social app, would be enough. She could move to the next step. But in fact, things were far from going her way. How could chatting online for just a few days convince her that he'd fall for her? Online romance is unreliable. And so, Gamora's plan backfired. Outside Xander, Ignace was piloting his spaceship, sitting side by side with Isdeth, watching over the now-captive Gamora. Gamora kept struggling desperately. Not long ago, she'd arranged to meet Ignace, hoping to get a look at his spaceship. Of course, what she hinted at wasn't as simple as just taking a tour of the ship. Maybe she was also curious to see how comfortable the beds on board were. Ignace agreed readily, and Gamora thought she'd hooked him for sure. She quickly got herself ready and set out. But the moment she stepped into the ship, she was ambushed. Dart guns and stun guns, all controlled by the AI cube, subdued her in an instant. Gamora was indeed a formidable assassin, someone who struck fear into the hearts of many across the galaxy. But facing a dozen tranquilizer guns and a dozen stun guns, all expertly orchestrated by the AI cube, even her serpentine agility couldn't save her, not with the cabin sealed off in a heartbeat. There was simply no way she could dodge every single shot. So she snapped. Let me go, you bunch of bastards. Gamora snarled and fought against her restraints. Meanwhile, Isdeth was wrapped around Ignace's arm, and he held her close in return. The two of them were still bickering over who really wore the pants in the relationship, completely ignoring Gamora's predicament. Gamora, after quite some time, the two finally negotiated a temporary truce. At least in front of others, Isdeth decided to give Ignace a little face. With his arm still around Isdeth, Ignace turned with her to look at Gamora. How naive can you get? In this day and age, people still fall for online romances. Ignace said with a grin. The truth was, cold-blooded assassin as she was, Gamora didn't even really understand what an online romance was. After all, her life had been nothing but missions and killing. Her father had never taught her how to interact with others. So when Ignace chatted her up online, said a few sweet words, and showed a little concern, she instantly thought she'd baited him, that he'd fallen for her. If clinging to a fantasy is delusional, then Gamora's delusion was in a league of its own. It dawned on Gamora then. He'd seen through her plan to steal something from the very beginning. How clueless can you be? You've been spying on us for so long. Don't you get it? Ignace loves only me, Isdeth declared, rubbing her cheek affectionately against Ignace's. She and Ignace, that was true love at first sight. Ignace had always liked her, ever since he watched Akame Ga kill in his last life. Isdeth had been his favorite back then, too. Gamora, even being caught like this didn't faze her. If she died, so be it. She was utterly indifferent. After all, after Thanos wiped out her home, her heart had died as well. But these two, could they just talk like normal people? Did they have to start flirting at the drop of a hat? This was just too much. Gamora glared angrily at the two of them. She had been watching them for a long time now, having endured days of their public displays of affection. Who would have thought that even after being captured, she'd still have to put up with this? The beautiful assassin's defenses were finally breached. Ignace watched Gamora with a gentle smile. He thought, it's good that her guard is down. With her psychological defenses weakened, it'll be easier to communicate. Besides, to be honest, he really didn't feel anything for Gamora. This alien beauty simply didn't do it for him. There was no spark at all. After all, individual preferences, or even aesthetic standards between different species, can vary dramatically. His own sense of beauty simply couldn't accept people who looked unusual or strange, especially when it came to intimate interactions of a certain nature. It was truly beyond him. Even back in school on Earth, when some of his classmates, black girls, showed interest in him, he couldn't help but feel awkward and uncomfortable about it. His view on foreign women was actually like this. He thought white women were quite attractive, a few light-skinned Indian women had a unique charm. Japanese girls knew how to dress and were delightfully sweet, and South American women were fiery and passionate. But when it came to black women, even those highly praised, light brown-skinned beauties, he simply couldn't accept them. He was always worried about having a child with skin as dark as charcoal. He wasn't an idiot. After living in the West for so long, he understood that, within the human race on Earth, most people's aesthetic preferences are similar. They all like beautiful, sexy women, or women love handsome, strong men. 1. Aesthetics are actually the same in the East and West. Don't believe the nonsense you see online. Just look at foreign websites, and you'll see. Everyone likes attractive people. Among black folks, a large portion are, frankly, not appealing at all. 2. Star-Lord is outside the standard human aesthetic. Those who get it, get it. He's even hooked up with women who have fangs and sharp teeth. So, ever since Gamora started deliberately seeking him out, Ignace never once thought about giving her a second look. She doesn't fit his sense of beauty. He didn't discriminate against people of other skin colors, but he also wouldn't accept romantic advances from anyone outside his range of aesthetic acceptance. Several days passed. After a series of friendly conversations between Ignace and Gamora, she finally gave in. Gamora revealed to him that the others planned to make a deal with the Collector, and she also confessed her true reason for betraying Thanos. After all, once Gamora realized that Nasi wasn't an enemy, there was no point in continuing to oppose him. Right now, her top priority was figuring out how to hide the mysterious orb. When I heard that Thanos was going to help Ronan destroy an entire planet, it was something I simply couldn't accept. I couldn't bear to work for him any longer. Thanos conquered my home, murdered my parents right in front of me, and then forced me, through a cruel test, to choose between death or following him to survive. Gamora finally spoke. The way Thanos made her choose back then. It might not have looked cruel, but in truth, it was unspeakably cruel. Gamora had to balance what Thanos gave her, with nothing but a single finger. If she failed to maintain that balance, the consequences would be unimaginable. But even if she managed to master it, she would be taken away by Thanos to be trained, having witnessed the murder of her own parents by his hand, doomed to live a lifetime in torment. And what do you call that? That is the annihilation of one's humanity. If a person can even turn their back on those they love most, what are they if not worse than a beast? It was under such relentless agony that Gamora endured, holding on until now. So that's how it is. Ignace nodded, recalling Gamora's childhood story with vivid clarity. After all, the brutality Thanos displayed in her homeland, and the way he forced Gamora to choose, those scenes had burned themselves into Ignace's memory. Even now, he remembered them as if they had happened yesterday. It was that memory, above all, that revealed to Ignace that Thanos' quest to wipe out half the universe had nothing to do with restoring balance for peace. Not anymore. Thanos was simply a monster devoid of humanity, with morals so twisted they were beyond repair, a wretch who deserved nothing but death. Thanos, Mad Titan, who cares? In front of Ignace, he'd be finished all the same. Isdeth snorted, clearly holding no fondness for Thanos. Of course, what she truly longed for was a chance to pit her strength against the Mad Titan's army. Even as Isdeth changed under Ignace's influence, his constraints could not erase her love for battle. You don't understand. Thanos is incredibly powerful, and his subordinates are formidable too. You'd be wise to hide that mysterious orb, or, better yet, sell it to the Collector as I suggested. Otherwise, if the Power Stone falls into Thanos' hands, another world will be doomed at his command. Gamora urgently pleaded, now finding herself allied with Ignace and Isdeth. She truly cared about the fate of the Power Stone. She only hoped they would heed her warning. Gamora, I've always been curious about something, Ignace said, giving her a thoughtful look. There was something that had genuinely puzzled him all this time, especially in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where Thanos wasn't portrayed as overwhelmingly invincible. The superheroes could all hold their own against him, at least for a few rounds. In the movies, Thanos only held his ground in close combat when facing several heroes at once. And in the end, it was only with the 6 Infinity Stones that he was able to wipe out half of all life. So here's the question. If Ignace had comparable, or even greater, individual power, and then wielded the Infinity Stones, could Thanos possibly defeat him? Not to mention him. Even if just one of the superheroes with enough strength and the right constitution stepped up, learned how to use the Infinity Stones, they could have easily pummeled early Thanos. In the early days of the cinematic universe, Thanos could truly have been defeated. When the Chitauri invaded Earth, the Mind Stone was left behind on the planet. According to the original storyline, the Space Stone was taken away by Asgard. The location of the Soul Stone was guarded by Red Skull, and very few knew the secret of that place. Even the Power Stone nearly slipped through Thanos' fingers. In the original Guardians of the Galaxy story, Ronan seized the Power Stone, went rogue and betrayed Thanos outright. Ronan was eventually defeated by the Guardians, and Star-Lord handed the Power Stone over to the Nova Corps, the very same Nova Empire. But the Nova Corps, a bunch of fools, simply stored the Power Stone away, only to have Thanos snatch it right out from under them later on. That so-called Nova Prime in the movies? Nothing but a joke. At that point, Thanos hadn't gotten his hands on the Reality Stone, and the Time Stone was still in Doctor Strange's possession. Looking at it this way, the superheroes really had a dream hand to start with. Yet, aside from the Mind Stone, which ended up creating Vision, a piece of junk who managed to win the hearts of countless Marvel fans, everyone else just sat on the Infinity Stones and never bothered to explore their true potential or put them to use. Doctor Strange was no better. Aside from occasionally using the Time Stone to peek into the future, he was pretty much a clueless bystander. He didn't care. What might happen, didn't make any preparations, and only at the final battle did he raise a finger and put on a show, hinting at the slim chance of victory. Ignace simply couldn't understand it. Why not make use of the Infinity Stones to wipe out Thanos once and for all, and spare everyone all that trouble later? With such a perfect starting hand, they still managed to mess everything up. The creator gods never stepped in, and none of those other powerhouse figures from the tangled web of comic lore came wandering into the film universe to meddle. The Infinity Stones were basically invincibility passes. What's wrong? Gamora looked at him in confusion. If I could control this, would Thanos still be able to win? For now, Nasi handed the Space Stone to the Blood God. In Gamora's eyes, the Blood God simply slipped the Space Stone into his pocket, and just like that, the blue gem vanished into thin air. Gamora never even considered the possibility of anyone else being involved. After all, Thanos had Ebony Maw with his superpowers at his side, and as for Ignace's mysterious abilities, nothing seemed out of the ordinary to her. Next, Ignace took the Power Stone from his death's hand and smiled as he spoke. Why is it that you all prefer to run away, only fighting back when you're finally forced into a corner? The universe is harsh. Don't you think that mindset is a bit foolish? As soon as Nasi finished speaking, Gamora shook her head in haste. That's not true. I've heard Thanos say that this orb demands a lot from its user, Gamora said hastily. But I can handle it, Ignace replied. He truly could wield the Power Stone. In fact, he had previously conducted experiments, sending various grades of cursed spirits to try using it. The Power Stone was relatively easy to control, and its might was overwhelming. Even cursed spirits could tap into its energy. From these experiments, Ignace compared their endurance to his own and discovered that, when combined with his most powerful reverse curse technique, he could wield the Power Stone freely and without harm. Of course, everyone knew what without harm really meant. He was just being cheeky about it. That little Thanos? What a joke. Ignace was actually capable of defeating Thanos right now. Thanos might be formidable in close combat, but at this moment, he didn't have any stones. If Thanos dared show up, Ignace could blast him to pieces with the Power Stone. I don't believe it, Gamora said, shaking her head in disbelief. Ignace smiled at her and snapped his fingers. A moment later, a virtual screen appeared, playing footage of Ignace's experiments with the Power Stone. Since he wanted Gamora as an ally, and maybe even bring her into his company to work for him, Ignace felt it was only right to show some sincerity and demonstrate his true power. Gamora watched the recording in shock. There was Ignace, standing on an alien world, gripping the Power Stone and unleashing its energy to effortlessly obliterate a mountain before him. And that, she realized, wasn't even its full potential. In that instant, she understood there was no need to run anymore. With such overwhelming strength, Ignace could control the Power Stone, and he had the Space Stone as well. He could easily take down Thanos. Instead of being forced to flee, why not take the initiative and strike first? Ignace suggested. Gamora nodded eagerly. For the first time, she felt that someone could help her get revenge. Thanos' end was near. Several days later, a spaceship crossed paths with Ignace's vessel. Mr. Ignace, Mrs. Death, Miss Gamora, my master Tenelier Tyvan wishes to meet with you, came a woman's voice over the communications channel. Ignace glanced at Gamora. Tenelier Tyvan was the third-party buyer Gamora had contacted earlier. Although Ignace couldn't remember such a long name, he did know that Gamora's buyer was the Collector. Of course, the Collector's portrayal in the comics and in the movies was rather different. One was an elder of the universe, the other. Well, the other was all talk and, frankly, a bit of a letdown. In other words, a joke. Ignace had no intention of selling the Power Stone to him, but he was still willing to meet. Before long, both parties landed on Xandar, and Ignace boarded the Collector's ship. A man with white hair, tinged with a faint yellow, dressed in eccentric attire, greeted them warmly. However, the moment his gaze fell upon Ignace, he froze in surprise. He sensed something strangely familiar about Ignace. A curse of death. Young man, you're cursed. Did you know that? The Collector spoke, catching Ignace off guard. Huh, what's he talking about? It took a moment for Ignace to process the Collector's words. He was cursed? Come to think of it, there was that time a certain female Marvel cosmic entity gave him a gift, which turned his curse energy into something limitless. But was that really a curse? Calling it a gift would be more accurate. It's the scent of death. The Collector elaborated. Ignace paused. The goddess of death? Not Thor's sister, of course. Death did have quite the grudge against him. That much was true. But would she really bestow upon him a curse of immortality? Ignace was deeply skeptical. You know, I once made a wager with a woman. I lost, and, as punishment, she cursed me never to set foot in the realm of death. Not even a single step. The collector shared this with a wistful tone, explaining how he'd come by his ageless immortality. Ignace understood then. Death must dislike him just as much, refusing him entry into her domain. In other words, she'd already surreptitiously cursed him too. It seemed Ignace would end up like the collector, forever barred from the land of the dead, blessed, or cursed, with eternal life. Yet, his situation and the collector's differed from that of Deadpool. Deadpool had been cursed by the goddess of death and could never die. Slain 1,000 times, he would always return. As for the collector, in the original Avengers 3, his reappearance was merely an illusion conjured by Thanos using the Reality Stone. The collector's true fate remained a mystery. Some speculated Thanos had actually killed him. That speculation, in turn, raised an intriguing possibility. If both Ignace and the collector were cursed by death to never enter her realm, did that truly mean they could never be killed? For Ignace, however, this wasn't much of a concern. He possessed the most powerful reversal curse technique, which could resurrect himself. The strongest. Reversal spell could revive, but not grant immortality, while death's rather lackluster curse offered immortality, but perhaps not resurrection. This made things interesting. Ignace had found a loophole, a bug in the system, that allowed him to live forever, unending. Meanwhile, Gamora, listening to the collector's words, was utterly baffled. Cursed? The sin of death? She couldn't make heads or tails of their conversation. What are you two talking about? Gamora asked in confusion, glancing between them. The collector and Ignace exchanged knowing looks and shared a secretive smile. The secret of immortality, after all, was not for her to know. It's nothing. Ignace replied with a gentle smile, shaking his head. If it were someone else, immortality might eventually feel boring, but not for him. The universe is vast, and beyond the universe lies the multiverse. No matter how long he lives, he would never feel bored. Although he had previously used the pure gold given to him as a system reward, the so-called immortality granted by pure gold was actually based on the principle of halting the growth of human cells. But this came with its own drawbacks. First, once he wore the pure gold, training might no longer lead to increased strength. He would barely see any improvement. Another issue was that with pure gold, once the cells stopped growing and he was forever frozen in that state, any injury would become a serious concern. If he got hurt, he'd have to consider removing the gold immediately, or else the consequences could be dire. Compared to that, the curse of immortality placed on him by the goddess of death, her refusal to let him enter the realm of death, was actually much more favorable. None of those annoying complications or flaws. He simply had to make sure the goddess of death continued to hate him. TSK, TSK, TSK. In this day and age, surely no one would still try to get themselves killed just to win the favor of the goddess of death, right? Surely not, right? Take a lesson from the collector. He lost a bet and ended up cursed by the goddess of death to never enter her realm, which ironically granted him a unique form of eternal life. Ignace was the same. He was someone whom the goddess of death deeply despised. As a result, she absolutely refused to let him set foot in her domain. Even seeing him annoyed her. In this peculiar way, Ignace, too, gained immortality. By the way, let's talk about this. I'd like to buy it. What price do you think would be reasonable? The collector looked at Ignace, smiling as he spoke. Not for sale. Ignace replied with a smile. The collector shook his head helplessly. Young man, are you sure you can control it? He asked with a chuckle. I can. Ignace responded, still smiling. Seriously, the Infinity Stones, selling them for money? That would be unbelievably reckless. There's no way he'd dare do that. My friends, before the birth of everything, there were 6 singularities. After that, the Big Bang created the universe, and the remnants of those singularities eventually formed several particles, what we now know as the Infinity Stones. As the collector walked, he explained the origins of the Infinity Stones. These stones can only be wielded and controlled by incredibly powerful, extraordinary beings. As the collector finished speaking, a virtual screen appeared behind the group, playing footage from a distant past. Take a look. The owners of these stones could use them to annihilate entire civilizations in an instant. On the virtual screen, a colossal iron giant stood upon the earth, grasping a staff embedded with a glowing purple stone. It's as effortless as harvesting wheat, the collector said. As soon as the collector finished speaking, the iron giant on the virtual screen brought down its scepter with a thunderous crash upon the earth. Countless streaks of violet light erupted. The ground split asunder, and myriad living beings dissolved into smoke and vanished without a trace. The violet radiance spread relentlessly, soon engulfing the entire planet. In the blink of an eye, a whole planetary civilization was wiped out as if it had never existed. There was once a group who tried to absorb this energy into their own bodies, the collector continued, but they were reduced to ashes in the blink of an eye. As he spoke, a ring of cloaked figures appeared on the screen, each swallowed by the violet glow, paying the ultimate price for their foolishness. Ignis stared silently at the virtual screen. Wasn't this just stating the obvious? These 6 infinity stones are the very embodiment of the universe's 6 fundamental laws. Tiny, insignificant beings living inside a container, wishing to absorb the very core of that vessel into themselves. Was that not simply a fool's dream? So, no matter the price, I'll buy it. I just want to keep some idiot from making the same mistake again, the collector said, turning to Ignis. It seemed the idiot he was referring to was rather pointed. As a being of purple sweet potato descent, Ignis couldn't help but feel a little offended. Not for sale. Ignis shook his head again. If this old man had come here just to buy an infinity stone, he could forget it. Ignis still wanted to hear more stories from the distant past. The tales of the Marvel Universe from long, long ago must be magnificent and grand beyond imagination. Why not? Young man, are you really so arrogant as to believe you could stand on equal footing with them? The collector demanded, gesturing toward the screen at the iron giants and the cloaked figures of old. It's the Power Stone, and yes, I can control it. I have no intention of destroying anything. I just want to make sure that if some bastard ever tries to destroy the world and take away what matters most to me, I'll be able to kill him first, Ignis replied, producing the Power Stone. Both the Power Stone and the Space Stone were within Ignis's grasp, ready for his direct use. He had long since stripped away the outer casing of the Power Stone, letting its violet brilliance shine, captivating, yet unimaginably dangerous. The collector stared at Ignis in shock. He was holding the Power Stone barehanded, completely unharmed and seemingly unfazed by its pressure. Just how powerful was this man? Infinity, don't embarrass me. Ignis understood. With infinite cursed energy at his disposal, wielding the Power Stone wasn't all that difficult for Ignis. Of course, his earlier caution was entirely justified. Better safe than sorry. Meanwhile, off to the side, a pink-skinned alien woman gazed at the Power Stone in Ignis's hand, her emotions in tumult. Hearing the collector's words only fueled her agitation further. She was so worked up, she could barely restrain herself from snatching the Power Stone right then and there. She continued to walk forward, her eyes hungrily fixed on the gemstone in Ignis's hand. Greed had all but drowned out her reason. Karina, stand down. The collector barked coldly, but the young woman paid no heed to his words. Though the collector's tone was harsh, in truth, he was trying to save her. Karina glanced at the collector, her expression twisted, then looked at the Power Stone again. Greed surged once more, overwhelming what was left of her sanity. She glared at the collector in fury and shouted, "I will never be your slave again." With that declaration, Karina lunged, grabbing for the gemstone in Ignis's hand, desperate to snatch it away. Ignis regarded her with an amused expression, making no move to stop her. Instead, he set the gemstone down on the table, leaving it for her to seize. He then accepted the Space Stone from Isteth, and in the next instant, Ignis, Isteth, and Gamora vanished from the room. Karina's hand closed around the Power Stone. If someone was so eager to volunteer for a Power Stone versus user's physical limits experiment, especially with such reckless intent, Ignis saw no reason to stop them. After all, he wasn't about to keep anyone from courting disaster. Suddenly, the collector's mansion erupted in explosions. Machines blew apart, showers of sparks arcing through the air. Karina began to scream, her voice sharp with terror and agony, as the Power Stone's energy surged wildly into her body. Her once pink skin began to turn a deep violet. Her body broke apart as purple light blazed furiously outward. In the blink of an eye, Karina exploded, vanishing in a burst of light. The collector's massive ship was rocked by the wave of energy, left battered and broken by the Power Stone's release. As soon as Karina's self-destruction ended and the chaos faded, Ignis once again used the Space Stone's power to teleport himself, Isteth, and Gamora back into the room. He handed the Space Stone to Isteth and picked up the Power Stone. "So, do you still want to buy it?" Ignis looked down at the disheveled collector with a wry smile. 2 stones. The collector stared in shock at the gems in Ignis's and Isteth's hands, utterly stunned. He had never imagined anyone could wield 2 infinity stones at once. Meanwhile, Gamora was still standing there, completely dumbfounded. She remained rooted to the spot, eyes wide in disbelief as she gazed at Ignis. She was truly astounded. Seeing Ignis use the stones in a video was one thing, but witnessing it firsthand was something else entirely. A naive slave had tried to snatch the Power Stone, only to be instantly obliterated by its energy, her body torn apart in a violent explosion. That terrifying surge of energy left an indelible mark on her memory. At the very same moment, as she watched in terror while the Power Stone was being snatched away, panic gripped her. She was certain everything was doomed. Ignis, using the Space Stone, teleported her away in an instant. Just as she was catching her breath, feeling as if she'd narrowly escaped death, Ignis once again used the Space Stone and brought her right back. Gamora, the emotionless top-tier assassin, was genuinely shaken. Even now, she still hadn't recovered from the shock. After all, she had never witnessed the power of 2 infinity stones unleashed before. "So, you really don't want to destroy the universe?" the collector suddenly asked. After all, throughout history, anyone who managed to gather multiple infinity stones either wanted to rule the universe or, like a madman, sought to destroy it. destroying the universe. What would I possibly gain from that? Ignis replied with a smile. In fact, there's someone out there who does want to destroy the universe. I'm actually planning to use the Infinity Stones to take him down. In truth, stopping Thanos from wiping out half of all life in the universe was something anyone should want to do, superhero or not. Because Ignis couldn't be sure whether his death would be among the half that Thanos planned to erase. Snapping one's fingers and erasing half the universe. It all came down to a roll of the dice. No one in their right mind would want to gamble on odds like that. A 50% chance of death, frightening, didn't even begin to describe it. With those odds, those who died were simply unlucky, and those who survived would live with the pain forever. So there was no way he'd let Thanos snap his fingers and make him part of that deadly lottery. That's a relief. The Collector breathed, clearly moved. After all, he had amassed so many fascinating treasures and life forms from across the cosmos. He didn't want to see Thanos destroy them all. Wait a minute. Most of his collection at home had already been ruined by that bumbling idiot. Aside from a bit of mischief and his flexible sense of morality, Ignis wasn't truly a bad person at heart. All right, let's go, Ignis said, breaking the moment. The Collector watched as they left his battered and broken ship, climbed aboard their own vessel, and departed from Xander's starport. With a helpless shake of his head, he turned and went back inside. There was no way he could ever get his hands on the Power Stone or the Space Stone. He simply wasn't a match for them. With such overwhelming strength and the ability to wield two stones, what chance did he have? He certainly wasn't a fool like Karina, who blew herself up. The Collector sat in his shattered ship, sipping his drink. Before long, the Nova Corps arrived and began questioning him about what had happened. One of my unruly subordinates tried to assassinate me. Ended up blowing herself up, the Collector replied, covering for Ignis and concealing the truth. Meanwhile, Ignis was ready to have some fun on another planet. He soared out of his world, heading toward other solar systems. But halfway through this binary star system, he found his path blocked by an unimaginably massive warship. Meanwhile, from behind, a ship belonging to another faction was speeding toward him. He was caught between a tiger in front and a wolf behind. Without hesitation, Ignis used the Space Stone to teleport a preset gravitonium device onto the pursuing Marauder ship. The moment the gravitonium device activated, before the enemy could even fire a shot, their ship was instantly crushed by the gravity. Its hull contracted, bulkheads splintered, and the vessel exploded apart. In the blink of an eye, the broken ship was sucked helplessly toward the device's core, like garbage being swept away, and vanished into its gravitational maw. Based on his recent encounters in these star systems, Ignis guessed the ship behind him belonged to Yondu's crew. As for the enormous warship ahead, it could only be Ronin's. Just then, a transmission crackled through, confirming Ignis' suspicions. Ignis Mora, you blasted Terran, hand over what you've got right now, or I'll blow your ship to smithereens. Ronin's voice thundered through the comms, brimming with fury. Holding the Space Stone, Ignis didn't waste a second. He appeared directly aboard Ronin's warship. Ronin, still mid-shout, was stunned into silence when Ignis materialized before him. Wait a minute, what? Ronin's mind reeled. He demanded Ignis' hand over his prize, but he hadn't expected it to happen so literally. And how in the cosmos had this guy jumped across space to board his ship in an instant? So you're Ronin? Ignis stared at him, his voice cold. Terran, hand over what you're carrying. Maybe I'll be magnanimous enough to make you my slave. Ronin replied, coolly, gripping his warhammer. He wasn't the least bit rattled. If anything, he was downright arrogant. Which one do you want? The Tesseract, the Ether, or the Orb? Ignis grinned, toying with Ronin, as if paying homage to the Monkey King's antics in the Kingdom of the Women. Which heart do you want? Red, white, yellow, or the jealous one? Unfortunately, he was a little short on Infinity Stones at the moment. Ronin glared at Ignis, his expression darkening. He suspected he was being mocked. But when Ignis mentioned the Tesseract, Ronin's heart skipped a beat. If Ignis could just appear on his ship out of nowhere, he must be using the Tesseract, right? You fool. Do you know who I'm working for? Thanos. Ronin barked, then sneered. Humph. Hand over the goods now. I doubt you can stand against Thanos. Don't be so clueless about your place. As he finished speaking, he raised the warhammer in his hand and strode toward Ignis. If words could no longer resolve this, he would have to resort to force. Oh, how terrifying. Why didn't you let him come over? It's perfect timing for me to roast some purple sweet potatoes, Ignis teased with a playful smile. At once, Ronin flew into a rage. He swung his warhammer down with tremendous force. But in the very next instant, for reasons unknown, a shockwave suddenly blasted through the air. Before Ronin could even react, he was hurled backwards by its force. Suddenly, a figure darted out from the shadows. Nebula launched herself at Ignis, knife in hand, aiming to strike. Ignis, drawing on the power of the Space Stone, opened a portal in the blink of an eye, and Nebula dashed headlong into it. A portal appeared not far from the warship's steel wall. Nebula shot out from the other side, slamming her head directly into the wall with a resounding thud. Though Nebula had undergone cybernetic enhancements, it all depended on what she collided with. This time, her forehead met solid steel, and she had charged at full speed, determined to kill Ignis in one blow, moving as swift as a shadow. This Nebula was no match for her comic book counterpart. Her strength paled in comparison. Stars danced before Nebula's eyes. One hand pressed against the wall for support, the other clutching her bruised forehead as she forced herself to stand. She shot Ignace a venomous glare, then rushed at him again. Meanwhile, Ronan, still reeling from the combined shockwave unleashed by Ignace and the cursed spirit, staggered to his feet, his expression twisted in fury. Gripping his warhammer, he charged at Ignace once more. In the next moment, Ignace wielded the space stone again, conjuring two portals, one in front of Nebula and another in front of Ronan. Then, in the center of the chamber, two more portals appeared, facing each other. With a sickening squelch, Nebula's blade plunged into Ronan's chest, just as the shaft of Ronan's warhammer crashed down on Nebula's head with a heavy thud. Both froze in shock. Nebula stared in disbelief at the dagger lodged in Ronan's heart, while Ronan could only gape at the one who had killed him. One slumped to the ground, her head spinning from the blow, unable to do anything but seethe in helpless rage. Ronan, oh Ronan, wasn't that a bit too careless of you to die like this? Ignace commented with a chuckle, gazing at Ronan's lifeless body sprawled across the deck, blood pouring from his wounds, eyes closed forever. Alas, Ronan was already gone, unable to hear a word Ignace said. If he could, he'd probably leap up in fury, challenge him again, and take another dozen beatings before giving up. Ignace then turned to the battered but still breathing Nebula. He had intentionally spared her life. After all, her relationship with Gamora might seem volatile, even explosive, but deep down, they still cared for each other. Who knows, if he managed to bring Nebula back, perhaps he could forge a pair of superhero sisters to work for him. The thought suddenly struck Ignace. A well-used space stone was nothing short of invincible. Unfortunately, in the original story, Asgard possessed the space stone for such a long time, but whether it was because Asgard was too incompetent or simply disdained to use the space stone, no one ever truly mastered it. By the time it mattered, not a single person had learned how to wield the space stone. If you remember correctly, at the end of the first Avengers movie, Thor used a device to contain the Tesseract. With just a twist, the power of the stone could be accessed. But by the time of Infinity War, Thor and his companions seemed to have collectively lost their wits, failing to use the stone to open a portal and escape with everyone. Ignace glanced at Nebula, then looked out at the Kree soldiers charging at him down the corridor. With a touch of the space stone, in the next instant, countless portals sprang open right in front of them. They had no time to stop. Their momentum simply carried them straight through. Out in space, a multitude of portals appeared, and countless Kree soldiers were flung through, tumbling out into the void. Their own inertia sent them drifting ever farther into the cold darkness. Meanwhile, space offered no oxygen, the temperature was freezing, and there was deadly radiation everywhere. These people, freshly teleported from their warships, met instant death the moment they entered the vacuum. Ignace transported Nebula onto his own ship, leaving Gamora to look after her. Then, as he strolled leisurely through the warship, he announced that he had killed Ronan, all while fishing for a reaction. Within moments, the crew snapped, surging forward in a frenzy to swarm and kill him. But Ignace took advantage of their rush, opening portals right in their faces as they ran, sending wave after wave of Kree to their doom. Fighters, crewmen, logistics staff. Anyone who heard Ignace claim he had slain Ronan, and who already thought the warship was nothing special, a piece of junk, came barreling out, shouting their intent to kill him. It suddenly dawned on Ignace. It wasn't just films and television that were absurd. Reality itself had its share of fools. Of course, if some aliens didn't want to charge at him, that was fine too. He would just walk over and kill them himself. Either way, more and more aliens ended up running for their lives. In the end, a great wave of fleeing aliens found themselves face to face with yet another round of portals, appearing right before their noses. Yet another crowd of aliens was flung into space, where the harsh environment claimed them instantly. Novels can be ridiculous, but reality is even more absurd. Remember the last TGA Game Awards, when Elden Ring won? Hidetaka Miyazaki went up to accept the award, and a young man followed him on stage and even made a short speech. TGA thought he was with Miyazaki's team. Miyazaki thought he was with the TGA staff, and only later did everyone realize this kid didn't belong to either side. He just snuck in. It was dubbed the Red Phantom Invasion. Luckily, the guy didn't try to attack Miyazaki on stage, or it would have been an even bigger spectacle. Hilarious. A long time passed, as his death and the others grew increasingly impatient, and Gamora and her companions began to worry. They wondered aloud whether they should bring the Power Stone over to him. Although Nebula had been teleported here, in her grievously wounded state, she was in no condition to explain what had transpired aboard the warship. Ignace finally returned. Well, do you need my help? Such a massive warship. I imagine there's plenty to keep me busy. Isdeth leapt to her feet, barely able to contain her excitement. A ship that size would provide endless entertainment for her. It's done. Ronan is dead, and his warship now belongs to me. Ignace replied with a broad smile, his mood buoyant. He couldn't help but marvel at the effort it took to clear out all the enemies on such a colossal vessel. What's more, Ronan's Kree subordinates were all zealots. No matter how much he tried to persuade them, not a single one agreed to surrender or help him pilot the warship. Whether it was the age of tall ships, powered by sails centuries ago on Earth, the modern era of aircraft carriers, or even the interstellar warships of alien civilizations, all these vessels relied heavily on teamwork. Back in the age of sailing, a three-masted ship required a large crew working in concert. Aircraft carriers and battleships were even more dependent on the collective efforts of their crews. Ignis had indeed gained control of Ronan's warship, but it seemed the Kree had designed it to prevent hacking. Operating the vessel was strictly manual. So, there was no way for him to let the intelligent cube take over the controls. But since those Kree refused to read the room, he saw no reason to spare them. They were all extremists, after all, each with blood on their hands. Tossing them into the void of space didn't weigh on his conscience in the slightest. All right, next I plan to send the warship back to Earth, then go looking for Thanos, Ignis said, turning to glance at Gamora and Nebula. Gamora was out of the question. Thanos surely already knew she had betrayed him. Nebula, however, might still be useful. From Nebula, he could learn Thanos' usual whereabouts. In the blink of an eye, Ignis wielded the Space Stone to open a portal before the warship, preparing to send it back to Earth. Meanwhile, on Earth, satellites from nations around the world immediately detected the colossal portal that had appeared in space, and every alarm bell began ringing at once. The last time a portal like this appeared, well, the memory was still fresh. Ahem, the last time it happened was during the Chitauri invasion. The world's superheroes, along with Ignis and Isdeth, had managed to hold the line. But this time, word had it that Ignis and Isdeth had both left Earth, and the nations of the world were thrown into a panic. That last portal had nearly wiped out New York. Now, this portal dwarfed the previous one by an unimaginable margin. It felt as though the end of the world was upon them. Meanwhile, somewhere in America, inside a base belonging to an illegal organization. These days, S.H.I.E.L.D., now fallen from grace, no longer recognized by the world, and officially disbanded, has set up numerous secret bases at hidden locations. This place is one of Nick Fury's bases. Damn it, why does it have to be now? Nick Fury muttered under his breath, gripping Captain Marvel's communicator tightly. If anything dangerous came through that portal, especially some hostile alien force, he was ready to make the call to her immediately. In the next moment, a massive warship appeared, and it seemed as if the portal itself was reversing direction. All around the globe, countless so-called experts were left baffled. Was there no one on that ship? Why use the portal in reverse to bring the warship through? Was this just for show, to flaunt their technology? What the? Nick Fury, don't panic. And tell your higher-ups not to panic either. This is just a warship I picked up off-world, a little souvenir the previous owner didn't want, so I brought it back with me. Ignis had the intelligent cube patch into Earth's communication networks, and his voice rang out in Nick Fury's earpiece. Mother, are you kidding me? Nick Fury was stunned. Did Ignis really expect anyone to believe that story? But once he realized it was indeed Ignis, he quickly contacted the world's top officials, urging them to keep the news contained, block any leaks, and prevent the world from descending into unnecessary panic and chaos. Ever since the fall of Project Insight, S.H.I.E.L.D. had officially disbanded. Yet, in the shadows, they still existed, supported by many who continued to provide funding and technology. Nick Fury stared at the feed sent from NASA, utterly speechless. He knew Ignis had left Earth to explore the stars, but he hadn't expected him to return from a jaunt through the cosmos with an entire battleship in tow. It was like a newbie in a loot-based game, stepping into the starter dungeon, slaying the first low-level enemy, and suddenly getting a legendary weapon, then showing up in front of the seasoned pros and saying, I just walked out the door and picked up a legendary drop. Ignis was just too extraordinary. Nick Fury couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. So many organizations on Earth, after all these years, and not one had made significant progress with Chitauri technology. Then, out of nowhere, Ignis's company rolls out alien spacecraft tech, and the envy only deepened. Now, the man goes off-planet for a short trip, and comes back with another warship. I'd never take you for a fool, Fury. You're no fool. You're as cunning as they come. Ignis said with a laugh. Nick Fury. Well then, how about tossing something to an old friend? Maybe share a bit of that technology. Nick Fury asked, seizing the opportunity. He no longer cared if Ignis called him names like Mother, or Man, Black Egg, or One-Eyed Dragon. As long as he got the technology, Ignis was his god. No way. Ignis refused him outright. Back when he signed the military weapons development contract with the American side, he had played a trick. He deliberately set the project to something completely unrelated to his own company. So as long as he didn't research that particular project, the Americans had no justification whatsoever to get their hands on his technology. Of course, now Ignis was the one truly in control, and he didn't need to bother with any of that anymore. Across the world, high-ranking officials read the messages sent by Black Egg. Some were shocked, some were horrified, and others fell into silence. Naturally, there were those who felt anger, believing that Ignis should share such advanced technology with the entire world. But these hypocrites, for all their opinions, lacked the courage to act. After all, no one wanted a squadron of alien starships circling above their own homes. The Westerners did have one thing right. In negotiations, power is the real bargaining chip. Not long after, Ronan's warship was stopped by Ignis in Earth's gravitational orbit. Ignis messaged his company, instructing his team to come aboard and help him refit the vessel. With the warship under the control of the intelligent cube, future journeys would be much easier for Ignis. After all, traveling between the stars, a warship was far superior to a small spacecraft. It offered more space, greater safety, comfortable living quarters, and ample supplies of food and energy. Months passed. The solar system. A ship streaked through the void, firing energy beams again and again at the vessel ahead. It was Nebula. She had stolen a ship from the Mora Corporation, not to flee from Earth, but to hunt down her sister Gamora. Up ahead, another ship darted through space, pulling off a perfect maneuver. In an instant, it swung behind Nebula and unleashed a volley of energy blasts at her ship. At the same time, Earth, Mora Corporation headquarters. Ignis sat in his office, watching the surveillance feed. There was no audio, only visuals, a front-row seat to Nebula's pursuit of Gamora. On another screen, he watched from Gamora's perspective as she counterattacked Nebula. Nebula, thinking herself clever, had stolen one of Mora's ships and tried to destroy the onboard AI control system. What she didn't realize was that she hadn't truly disabled it. She thought she'd broken free, ready to wage her endless battle of love and rivalry with her sister, not knowing the whole thing was being broadcast live. In truth, Ignis had no intention of treating Nebula the same way he had Gamora. He wanted to recruit her through more conventional means, hoping she would join his Mora superhero team. It's certainly no simple matter, for Nebula is nothing like Gamora in terms of rationality. Right now, her heart is filled with nothing but hatred. Ignis didn't need to do much. All he had to do was watch as Nebula stole his ship, and then let her and Gamora continue their endless dance of love and rivalry. Those two would always find their own way to resolve their conflicts. Mr. Mora, everyone you summoned has arrived. At the doorway, a staff member announced. Very well, let them in. Ignis nodded in acknowledgement. Cube, turn off the surveillance feed, but continue to monitor the two of them in secret. Maintain control over the situation from the shadows. Ignis gave his command. Understood, Master. The intelligent cube, Mora, switched off the display, but continued silently tracking the battle between Gamora and Nebula. Not long after, several top officials from various countries entered, taking their seats across from Ignis, casting puzzled glances his way. We're not sure why you called us here. What's this about? One of them sat down, his expression stern as he addressed Ignis. I have a few announcements to make, but really, it's nothing too major. Ignis smiled, prompting the others to quickly force polite smiles in return. While I was away, the Western Fleet took a little cruise through someone else's waters. Brought along a few sidekicks too, didn't they? Ignis asked with a light-hearted chuckle. The officials exchanged uncertain looks and nodded. I'm not here to lecture anyone. I just want to make a suggestion. Starting today, every organization in the world must relinquish all ultimate weapons. And the Western Bloc, effective immediately, should disband every armed force. Any objections? Ignis's smile lingered as he looked around at them. Some faces brightened, while others grew grim. The countries without ultimate weapons were secretly pleased. Those who possessed them, however, were worried. Oh, and of course, I'm not forcing anyone's hand here. Let's say we start with the Western Bloc. Are you willing to give up those rights? If not, well, I did bring back a little treasure hovering overhead. I could send you a small gift. Perhaps after receiving it, you'll reconsider. Ignis's tone was playful, but the room fell into silence. A treasure? That's no treasure at all. That's an interstellar warship. A small gift? More like an orbital railgun. Ultimate weapons were certainly formidable, but just a few months ago, Ignis had already relocated most of the Mora Group's employees to live aboard the warship. What's more, the Mora Group had long since begun establishing ecological transformation bases on every solid planet in the solar system. Even if they were unwilling, even if they wanted to resist, their so-called ultimate weapons couldn't reach Ignis's head. Meanwhile, the other side's orbital cannon could send them all to the next world with a single shot. I think, for such a small matter, no one would refuse, right? In that case, I'm willing to help Earth develop its technology. Let's all work together, advance together, and strive to leave the solar system as one. Ignis said with a smile. In truth, ever since he left Earth for another planet, he had come to a sobering realization. Earth had been stagnant for far too long, and there was simply no way to break out of the solar system like this. Even if they managed to leave Earth, the best they could do would be to launch a satellite or a lousy probe. Hardly an accomplishment. What if everyone set aside their disputes, engaged in cultural exchange, and worked in true cooperation? Could Earth's civilization then rise to greatness? Humanity was always on a rise, but no one had ever seen it actually reach the summit. Over the past few months, he had sat in on some university lectures, learning about the relationship between ZB and the Empire and the concept of shared interests. With ZB, it was always a matter of life and death. No chance for peaceful coexistence, and the same was true for nations. Trying to unite everyone into one big family through culture alone, that was wishful thinking. Many countries around the world spoke English and celebrated Western holidays. Some even abandoned their own traditional festivals and forgot their customs. But look at them. Did they ever truly become the empire on which the sun never sets? No, that was already the empire at sunset. So he decided to start with friendly exchanges, allowing everyone to take small steps, gradually working toward the dream of a global family. Not long after, when those people finally left, they looked at each other with worry written all over their faces. Who couldn't see what Ignis was getting at? Yet none of them wanted to give up their own power. Still, they were afraid to die. They couldn't actually go through with a mutually assured destruction. After all, even if they were desperate, destroying everything would be easy, but mutual destruction was unlikely. They simply didn't have the means to hurt Ignis. Ignis' spaceship had counter-surveillance capabilities far beyond anything Earth could muster, and its speed was on a whole different level. What's more, there was an interstellar warship right above their heads. Even if they managed to devastate the Earth's surface in some last-ditch effort, hiding underground wouldn't save them. Ignis could send people down to drag them out one by one and finish them off. With such a terrifying sword of Damocles hanging over them, their sense of superiority as rule makers vanished in an instant. They tumbled from their pedestals, suddenly insignificant and small. 3 days later, several nations across the world announced to the public that from that day forward, they would abandon all acts of war and hand over every last doomsday weapon to the Moore Group. As for the United States, they went so far as to disband all armed forces entirely. In an instant, the world was thrown into an uproar. However, in a rather comical twist, that very day, a certain nation of thieves hurriedly and nervously announced to the UNESCO World Heritage Committee that all the heritage claims they had previously snatched, claims to things that never belonged to them, were henceforth null and void. Within the Moore Group, Ignis watched this clownish display and gave a cold laugh. Find them, he said, find them until every top official in that nation of thieves goes bankrupt and loses everything. And don't let them raise taxes to pass the burden on to others or wriggle out of responsibility in any other way. Ignis delivered these words in an icy tone. The intelligent cube, ever obedient to its master, readily accepted the command and even seemed to approve. That nation of thieves was truly shameless. Ignis had long since harbored a deep dislike for its ruling elite. Of course, dislike was one thing. He bore no ill will toward the ordinary people lower down. After all, the ones committing these disgraceful acts had always been the upper echelons, while the masses below were nothing more than unfortunate wage earners. Ignis didn't bother naming the country. Everyone knew. Apart from their obsession with pickled vegetables, there wasn't much else to say about that place. Perhaps it was a spiritual poverty that drove them, so desperate for identity that they'd go around stealing other nations' culture, filing heritage claims as if they could sneak their way into being the greatest nation in the universe. Ignis recalled a joke an elder in his family once told him when he was a child. In a long history of his own homeland, there was once a great general who led a campaign against a wild and barbaric land. The chieftains there were so arrogant, brandishing their sticks and charging in a fight, only to be utterly defeated. Of course, Ignis had always taken this tale as just a joke. That nation of thieves would never be so foolish in reality, though they certainly couldn't defeat that legendary general either. The elders had simply told the story for laughs, to amuse the younger generation. Ignis wasn't about to stoop to the level of thieves. Their entire ruling class was about to be ruined. He could afford to let bygones be bygones. After all, how could the living take offense at the dead? Master, a jump node has appeared in space near Jupiter in the solar system. According to the data from the Ronin warship systems, this is a fleet from the Sovereign Star, the voice of the intelligent cube suddenly announced. Ignis immediately went towards the screen, where surveillance footage of the space near Jupiter was displayed. Across the major planets of the solar system, he had been transforming the environments to make them suitable for human habitation. Aside from the gas giants, he'd already established a robust solar system network and was keeping watch over everything within the system. He had no choice. Wandering beyond Earth, he could never predict what trouble he might attract. If someone took advantage of his absence to attack Earth in revenge, the consequences would be dire. Odin didn't have many years left, and even Thor had become something of a disappointment to Asgard. The time that Asgard could shield Earth was running out. There were certain unwritten rules that, once this protection faded, others would surely seek to break. Ignis needed to finish building a complete transportation network across the solar system, establish off-world colonies, and form a self-defense interstellar fleet. The chief had started preparing to build warships months ago. Ignis's approach was straightforward. He entrusted the matters of governance to each nation, letting them carry on with their work. As for himself, he couldn't be bothered with such tedious affairs. Instead, he aimed to become an indispensable presence, a ZB, for every country in the world, replacing a great many people, and in doing so, binding them to his cause both through shared interests and through sheer power, effectively tying them to Ignis's flagship. With this in place, he no longer had to worry about the fate of humanity on this little blue planet. After all, in the vast Marvel universe, there were countless worlds, yet the one he felt most at home on, time and again, was still this battered little Earth. He had to protect the place where he lived. Otherwise, without a familiar environment, no matter where he went, he'd always feel a hollow emptiness inside. Not long after, the flagship of the Sovereign sent a message of goodwill, requesting a meeting with Ignis, expressing their desire to speak with him. The Sovereign fleet halted at a safe distance from Earth. Under the watchful gaze of the Kree warships, the flagship descended to the planet's surface. Ignis stood on the outskirts of New York, watching as a golden-skinned woman descended from the ship. She wore an ornate golden headdress, a symbol of authority. Draped in a white cape, she lifted her skirt delicately in both hands, taking measured, mincing steps toward Ignis. At her side, two other golden-skinned Sovereign bent forward, each gripping the handles of a red carpet's rolling mechanism, slowly unspooling the carpet. With every bit of progress, the regal woman would advance 2 tiny steps. Trailing just behind her were 2 more Sovereign, faces expressionless, always half a step slower, following her at a deliberate pace. Ignis couldn't help but be bemused. Weren't the Sovereign people just a bit too eccentric? This was performance taken to an absurd level. Was it meant to dazzle, or was it simply a display of awkwardness? Around the globe, the media broadcast the scene live, their cameras capturing every moment of contact between Ignis and the alien visitors. Some outlets went so far as to pair the spectacle with grand, ceremonial music, focusing their lenses on this noble alien woman. Suddenly, the atmosphere at the scene turned tense. The rolling mechanism for the red carpet jammed. The 2 Sovereign attendants tugged at it awkwardly, sneaking embarrassed glances at High Priestess Aisha. Yet the High Priestess maintained her poise, hands holding her skirt, her golden face expressionless as she stared ahead, unfazed and showing not a flicker of anger. The Sovereign's background was reminiscent of the Kryptonians from the neighboring universe. Every Sovereign child was born of carefully designed genes, each with a predetermined specialty. Their destinies were set from the very moment they entered the world. At the world's largest television station, even the backstage crew were glued to the live broadcast. When they witnessed this historic moment suddenly grind to a halt, one staffer froze in surprise, his hand unconsciously slipping. By sheer accident, his fingers landed on the button controlling the music, abruptly cutting off the grand ceremonial tune. The sudden silence, paired with the High Priestess standing motionless and her 2 attendants struggling with the stuck red carpet roller, created a moment of collective awkwardness felt by viewers across the globe. It was the kind of scene that made people everywhere want to comment, as if they'd just seen a ghost at a Japanese sports festival. Such a solemn occasion. The first meeting between Earthlings and extraterrestrials, destined to become an iconic image in history, had been disrupted by a stuck red carpet? You gotta be kidding me. The High Priestess let out a sharp breath through her nose. Clearly, she was not above feeling a little irritated, even if she tried to hide it. After all, this was the same High Priestess from the original story who, for all her lofty talk about the importance of the Sovereign people, and their devotion to genetic engineering, secretly chose to have a natural-born child in the end, a classic case of double standards. For an emotionless Sovereign, it was only natural that the High Priestess had a touch of feeling in her after all. In fact, in the original plot, she even teased Star-Lord, "Why don't we try your method of communication?" Suddenly, the carpet roller jerked back to life. The 2 attendants quickly resumed unfurling the red carpet, and the High Priestess, regaining her composure, continued her dignified, brisk steps forward, head held high. "Mr. Morag, I have come for the fate of Sovereign. I wish to ask for your help. May we come aboard to talk?" The High Priestess Aisha hastily inquired. "Of course," Ignis replied, nodding without hesitation. Truth be told, he was struggling not to laugh. It took all his effort to keep a straight face as Aisha made her awkward approach. If he managed to look respectful, it was already a huge effort. Then Ignis and the High Priestess boarded the Sovereign flagship together. Meanwhile, the 2 Sovereign attendants quickly gathered up the red carpet again. All around the world, viewers fell into a stunned silence. What a letdown. Other than the fact that this alien looked like a walking gold bar, there really wasn't much else to remark on. At the same time, elsewhere in the galaxy, a terrifying incident was unfolding in the Nova Empire's prison. An oval-shaped spaceship, reminiscent of a giant ostrich egg, smashed its way inside. An older man with slick-back hair, accompanied by a woman with long antennae, forced their way into the prison. With a casual wave, the old man sent a pale blue beam of light sweeping before him, instantly obliterating all the armed guards in his path. Ego made his way straight to the detention area. Another wave of his hand unleashed a blue energy blast that blew a hole through the heavy, reinforced doors. Striding into the cell block, Ego surveyed the stunned prisoners, searching the crowd for someone in particular. Star-Lord, Rocket Raccoon, and Groot stood frozen in astonishment, their jaws practically on the floor as they stared at the old man who had barged in. It was as if they just witnessed something unbelievable. This guy was incredible. "Son, I finally found you," Ego said, beaming as he looked at Star-Lord. Star-Lord blinked in confusion. "Huh?" Rocket Raccoon and Groot immediately turned to look at Star-Lord. "His dad?" "Your dad," Rocket blurted out. "Your dad." Star-Lord glared at Rocket, clearly annoyed. He had absolutely no idea who his father was, for crying out loud. "Hey, don't be like that. For all you know, this could really be your long-lost father. Just look at him, what a legend. You'd be lucky, you know," Rocket teased with a mischievous grin, earning yet another glare from Star-Lord. Not long after, News reached the Nova Empire that the prison had been breached. They quickly dispatched a fleet to investigate and broadcast the images of Ego, Star-Lord, Rocket Raccoon, and Groot across the entire galaxy, issuing a warrant for their arrest. The story had taken a different turn. Star-Lord never met Gamora, ended up spending several years in prison, never helped defeat Ronan, and never delivered the Power Stone to the Nova Empire. Naturally, he had no ties with Nova, and now the Nova Empire had launched a full-scale manhunt for Star-Lord across the galaxy. Yet the Nova Corps couldn't locate Star-Lord at all. Ego was simply too powerful. He opened a jump point and whisked Star-Lord and the others to a place over 700 jump points away from the Nova fleet's reach. Besides, the Nova Corps wouldn't stand a chance against Ego anyway. Earth. So, what you're asking is for me to step in, help you protect your adamantium batteries, and by doing so, ensure the safety of your people. Ignatius listened to the High Priestess Aisha's request, raising the question. He suspected Aisha might be overestimating her persuasive powers. After all, she might not be able to convince him at all. That's right. I sincerely invite you to Sovereign. Help me safeguard the adamantium batteries. The lives of my people must never be threatened. Aisha replied earnestly. They are products of meticulous genetic design, perfection, both physically and mentally. We control the genetic material of future generations and cultivate them in artificial cocoons. High Priestess Aisha sat regally on her flagship's throne as she spoke, her tone measured and calm. In short, the structure of the Sovereign Society was somewhat reminiscent of Superman's home planet in the neighboring DC universe. Every citizen was a product of genetic engineering, their destinies predetermined before birth, even down to their future occupations. Since the Sovereign required vast numbers of artificially bred infants, a tremendous supply of energy was necessary. The adamantium batteries Aisha spoke of, though small in size, were capable of providing vast amounts of power. A formidable monster was about to attack them, a creature so powerful that, despite its octopus-like appearance, could fly, travel through space, and launch long-range attacks. Its hide was thick, its flesh tough. Ordinary weapons couldn't even scratch its defenses. The Sovereign people were no match for this monster, so they needed to find someone capable of defeating it. So, what kind of reward are you willing to offer? Ignis looked at High Priestess Aisha with a playful smile. He couldn't care less about where their children came from, nor did he have the patience to explain how kids were made on Earth. We can provide you with a squadron of 30 remotely operated space fighters, as well as 3 Sovereign starships, along with the corresponding training for your personnel. High Priestess Aisha quickly offered. Ignis considered it for a moment. On the surface, it sounded like a good deal, but in truth, it wasn't all that great. After all, his company's engineers had already started studying the technical manuals and theoretical books that the Big Boss had distributed on how to build interstellar warships. All he needed was a bit of patience. Eventually, his team would be able to build warships themselves. Previously, the Big Boss had only researched Chitauri biotechnology and the technology behind small spacecraft. The fact that he could already construct slightly larger ships was quite an achievement. But the difference between a warship and a small spacecraft was as vast as that between a yacht and an aircraft carrier. It wasn't something you could pull off just because you knew a little alien tech. High Priestess, I'm afraid I can't accept. I can't leave this place for the time being. You'd better find someone else. Ignis replied with a smile. Then let me offer more. High Priestess Aisha hurried to raise the stakes. After all, it was only a matter of payment. If there was one thing she didn't mind, it was people who liked to negotiate for higher rewards. That's not really the issue here. Ignis shook his head quickly. Then how about 60 remotely operated space fighters and 5 Sovereign starships? Aisha offered, completely unfazed. As long as it didn't interfere with their planet's next generation of genetic cultivation, this was a small price to pay. After all, the one thing the Sovereign had in abundance was spaceships. Their real shortage was manpower. Unlike other planets, where combat ships were piloted directly, the Sovereign operated their warships remotely from virtual consoles in a command hall, watching screens as they steered the fighters. That alone showed just how scarce their population was. All right, you've got a deal. I'll send someone right away. Ignis instantly changed his tune. With such sincerity, how could he refuse? Sure, he could keep developing slowly on his own, but getting a batch of ready-made warships and fighters to arm his company sounded like a pretty good arrangement. Send someone? Aisha was stunned. Wasn't he supposed to go in person? That's right, take a look at these people. Who do you want to send? Ignis held up his phone, pulling up a list of superheroes under the Morris Superhero Company. There was Dr. Banner, who could transform into the Hulk, and had now found peace with his other self. There was also Michael, whom Ignis had transformed into a vessel for a cursed spirit. Next was Gamora, who had just joined Ignis's company and agreed to become a hero. And finally, Thor, who had previously signed on with the Morris Superhero Company. Since starting his new job, Thor realized he was spending less time glued to his wife, Jane Foster, which meant fewer arguments and a much more harmonious life together. This one, and this one, the High Priestess said, pointing at 3 of them. After a moment's hesitation, she decided that might not be enough, and added one more to the list. As her fingers slid across the screen, a picture of Thor popped up. The High Priestess paused, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. Wait a minute. Why did he look so familiar? She was momentarily stunned. This man looked exactly like Thor, the Prince of Asgard. He really was a dead ringer. She marveled quietly to herself. Who would have thought Earth had someone who looked so much like Thor? Then, she noticed his name and alias. Thor, nicknamed the God of Thunder. The High Priestess, Aisha, froze again. She hurriedly tapped to the next page, and when she saw the photo of Thor's hammer on the screen, she was left speechless. She quickly looked up at Ignace. I have to ask, this really is Thor of Asgard, isn't it? That's right, Ignace replied. Ever since the New York incident, Thor has rarely left Earth. He even married a human, had a child, and settled down here. A look of utter disbelief washed over the High Priestess. This was beyond outrageous. Asgardians were notoriously proud, so much so that they refused to integrate with the rest of the galaxy, barely even using alien networks. And in the eyes of aliens, Earth had always been nothing more than a remote backwater, hardly worth their attention. Yet here was Ignace, telling her that the God of Thunder was now working for humans. Aisha was absolutely floored. This was as absurd as it got. Was this really the same haughty, untouchable Asgardian race? Then I'd like Michael, Banner, Gamora, and Thor to help us, the High Priestess Aisha quickly said, a satisfied smile tugging at her lips, clearly feeling she'd struck gold. I'm afraid not. Thor is Asgardian. Being a superhero on Earth is already the furthest he's willing to go for the sake of honor, Ignace replied with a chuckle. Add 5 more warships to the deal, and a substantial sum of funding. Deal. Thor, is this the glory you were talking about? Damn it. A short while later, Thor, Banner, and Michael all arrived in quick succession. Nebula, who had recently reconciled with her sister, piloted a battered spaceship and returned with Gamora. Sorry, I messed up your ship, Gamora apologized hurriedly. One ship was blown to bits, the other looked like it had been through a war, with a gaping hole in its side. If it hadn't been for the energy shield sealing the breach, the two of them might have died in the vacuum of space halfway back. It's nothing. It's just a ship, Ignace replied with a smile. He certainly wasn't short on spaceships now. In fact, he had an entire fleet at his disposal, thanks to the generous sponsorship of the High Priestess of Sovereign. So, Nebula, what are your plans? Ignace turned to Nebula and asked. My sister said you might be able to stop Thanos. So for now, I'm joining your team to help you out. But one day, I'll kill him myself, Nebula replied, arms folded across her chest. All right, do your best. And as for the damage to these 2 ships, I'll just deduct it from your and Gamora's paychecks, Ignace said with a sly grin. Nebula and Gamora both froze in surprise. He just told them it was fine, and now he wanted compensation. Ruthless. It's only some wages. I don't care, Nebula snorted. Then I'll just take Gamora's share out of yours, Ignace chuckled. You think you can get away that easily? Nebula's face grew cold, and she turned away, but the twitching at the corner of her mouth was impossible to miss. All right, Gamora, get ready. There's a mission for you. You, Banner, Michael, and Thor will head to the Sovereign for an assignment, Ignace announced. Is there a bonus? Nebula quickly asked. There is, Ignace replied with a smile. Then I'm in, Nebula said at once. It definitely wasn't because she wanted to work with her sister. She just wanted to pay off her debt. High Priestess, let me introduce you. This is Nebula, Ignace said, smiling. The High Priestess Aisha's expression twitched sharply. What, Nebula? Isn't she Thanos' adopted daughter? The High Priestess suddenly felt a pang in her heart. Thanos' daughter? Hiring Nebula would surely cost a fortune. Suddenly, she sensed something was off. She glanced at Gamora. Wait, isn't she also Thanos' daughter? And she didn't even ask for more money. She'd originally planned to get Ignace's people to work for free, but with both Gamora and Nebula on board, plus Thor, she suddenly didn't dare try to shortchange Ignace anymore. There was no helping it. The boss might be an Earthling, but his employees had some serious backgrounds. Just as the High Priestess was about to leave, she stopped in her tracks and looked at Ignace with a puzzled expression. There was something strange about this man that she just couldn't put her finger on. Moreover, their technicians had scanned Ignace's body and told her that the structure of his brain was not the same as that of humans from Earth. What's your lineage, Mr. Mora? High Priestess Aisha quickly turned to look at Ignace, asking with curiosity. Earthling, Asian, Han Chinese from the Flower Kingdom. Why do you ask? Ignace looked at the High Priestess, puzzled. No, there's something about you that's a little different from humans. High Priestess Aisha shook her head immediately. Or perhaps, is it possible that either your mother or father is not of earthly descent? They're both from Earth. Ignace smiled and shrugged, already catching on to what the High Priestess meant. Plus, with his knowledge of the world of sorcery, he had already guessed that after gaining the ability to use sorcery, the structure of his brain must have changed to resemble that of a sorcerer. No, I'm certain that among your ancestors, someone must have come from another planet. High Priestess Aisha insisted. When they had landed on Earth, her people had already scanned other humans. While many onlookers were gawking at the aliens for the spectacle, the aliens had already been scanning Earth, gauging the level of threat and assessing the planet's value. Pure-blooded Earthling, Ignace replied with a smile, leaving High Priestess Aisha unwilling to press further, not wanting to complicate the mission. She nodded coldly, then turned and walked away. Aisha had wanted to mutter how sickening this combination was, but thinking it might jeopardize the mission, she kept her thoughts to herself. The High Priestess left, taking the superheroes with her as they boarded the warship, preparing to depart Earth and head for the jump point back to Sovereign. A few weeks later, Ignace, accompanied by his death, and bringing along a few cursed spirits for good measure, left Earth. They boarded a spaceship, ready to wander the Milky Way and see where their journey would take them. As soon as they boarded the ship, they left Earth, activated the jump point, and set course for a tourist planet somewhere in the galaxy. Several days later, Ignace sat on the grass of a planet blanketed with vibrant pink foliage, as if he'd stepped into a fairy tale world, sipping his drink. After a few days of galactic travel, he found that some places were downright revolting, while others felt dreamlike and surreal. Ignace slid his hand across the holographic star map projected in front of him by the ship. After several more days, he selected a rather promising solar system as their next destination. To get there, they would have to jump through 7 different star systems along the way. It just so happened that he didn't feel like using the cosmic cube for travel this time. After all, using it for sightseeing would be a bit dull and would ruin the mood. He simply wanted to enjoy the journey with Death, savoring the slow voyage and the intimacy of their time together. Several days later, in an unknown solar system somewhere along the way, Ignace's spaceship appeared not far from a crimson planet. The red planet was strikingly beautiful, its surface shimmering with streaks of blue energy. Ignace sat by the window, gazing at the patterns that adorned the planet's face. By coincidence, or some strange twist, he couldn't shake the feeling that the outlines on the planet resembled a human face. What intriguing world, he thought to himself.